the first word that comes to mind is like initiative.
Yep.
Being able to just kind of take on tasks because you were showed them, or just if you don't know how to do something, pick up a broom and start sweeping instead, right?
Would you do
Until
that?
you're given it, absolutely. And I would sweep, like, you think I ever made an apprentice carry my tools in or sweep for me?
No,
Absolutely not.
but they're the apprentice. It's
No,
above their
no
jobs.
jobs above me, man. Like, yeah. And now as a firefighter, what do you think I'm doing right now, John?
Man, I can't wait to get to that.
Apart from being on fire trucks and everything like that, I clean toilets.
Yep.
You know, like that's because that's where you start. You're the apprentice again.
Yeah.
And the firefighting industry is like almost exactly like the trades. It's a trade.
We don't have enough construction industry workers to build the 3.5 million
Who's going to train
additional
the
homes.
next generation of construction workers?
Still has a lot more jobs than people willing to work them.
What can be done on an industry level to bring more new workers into careers in
We could
construction?
need more than 500,000 additional construction workers on average just to build all the homes that are going to be needed.
Introducing the PeopleBuilt podcast with John Wiehler. Because the city we've built is nothing without the stories of the people who built it.
Good day, and welcome back to the PeopleBuilt podcast. I am really excited to be joined by Kevin Young, who followed a very interesting career path where he started off as a plumber with Wiehler Mechanical coming from Vancouver, and just very recently got to join the Calgary Firefighters, exited his career as a plumber, and now I get to kind of hear about his path and his journey from joining the industry to leaving the industry. Kevin, thanks so much for joining me.
Appreciate it, John. Thanks. Happy to be here.
So let's start with how old are you?
40. Just turned 40 September.
Wow. And that actually just happens to coincide when you joined the fire department as well and you finally got on?
My life seems to fall in decades, man. Like when I was 30, I started plumbing.
Yeah.
And it was like an apprenticeship, and you start at the bottom again. I went from owning my own company in my 20s to then getting into plumbing in my 30s and being bossed around, and not in a terrible way, and then now in my 40s, it's a whole new career and a new path, man.
What? I didn't know that. What did you do in your 20s then to kind of stop at 30 and then start kind of at the bottom of the totem pole as a first-year apprentice and moving from Vancouver to Calgary, if I'm not mistaken?
Yeah, Victoria. But yeah, it was, I was doing outdoor advertising, had my own company working with like BC Ferries and Pattison outdoor advertising, so like billboards and stuff like that. It was just me and one other guy. And yeah, at that point, I kind of realized that it was either hire more people, which I didn't really want to deal with more employees. So it was time to kind of move on from that. I was able to find somebody to take on that work and was able to just kind of push it aside. And the biggest deciding factor was meeting my wife when I was 28. And that kind of steered us. We did long distance for a year and a half. And recognizing then at 30 that it was time for something new. And I knew firefighting in the distance was my goal, but I also knew that I wanted to get a different trade was basically the ultimate like decider in that, to go with my wife and start a new path, new career. So we lived in Winnipeg for a year and then came to Calgary.
Interesting. So becoming a firefighter when you were 28, that was the goal?
Becoming a firefighter eventually was my goal.
Yeah.
So it was building my resume in my 30s. I believe that was like my ultimate kind of push. And whether that was getting into firefighting when I was 35 or now 40 is how long it kind of took me. It's a process, and just building up that resume. So I went and did high angle rescue for a year and a half. And that was while my wife was working in Winnipeg. I was going up to Fort Mac, back and forth doing that. And then once I got a year and a half under my belt there, I felt comfortable enough with high angle rescue that I could go into a trade and then continue building that resume to be able to one day submit it to Calgary Fire and try to get on there.
Is that important? Like for somebody who is in their like late 20s, right, who wants to pursue a career like as a firefighter, why did you not just go straight into firefighting? Why did you pick a trade first?
Because firefighting isn't guaranteed. When you get through the whole process, you're like the top 2% of applicants that get in to fire. So there's a lot of pressure on that side. It's very competitive. And so I kind of just knew that from the start. And it was getting a trade was always going to be my fallback. Always have a skill that I could fall back on. And even now as a firefighter, I can still be a plumber. You know, you'll never lose that skill. So it was building that foundation for me that was important.
Interesting. And so why plumbing then?
Plumbing, I believe there's a lot of intertwining with plumbing and firefighting. You got pump systems, you know, you're dealing with friction, pressure loss, hoses, water, you know, it all just coincides, right? It was either that or electrician. And some days, you know, when I cause leaks in houses, I wish I was an electrician. But at the end of the day, like, I wouldn't trade it, man. Like, I got on with you as the first company I ever applied for, you know, and it was success from there, I believe.
Yeah, and I think, you know, it's a good point. Like I remember taking a phone call from Graham in Vancouver.
Yeah.
And he says, John, there's a guy who's going to call you. His name's Kevin. He's like, know your apprentice, hire him. He's a great guy. Right. And, you know, I had a standing policy that someone tells me that I just hire the people. Like, I think you and I talked, so, you know, Graham speaks highly of you. So 100%.
Yeah.
Like, we're going to work together. And I think it was really interesting to go through that 8-year journey with you. And, you know, and as you sit here and you talk about what that was like between 28 and 40, basically, I'm trying to, like, my memory says I didn't know any of that.
I played it pretty close to my chest just because I didn't want to maybe put out a goal into the universe that wasn't going to be achieved just because I knew how competitive it was.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to necessarily, like, maybe disappoint myself or people around me in a way.
Yeah.
So it was always, the focus was become a journeyman first and then worry about the fire. It was get that trade that had that value, right? And then if I never got into fire, in my mind, it was going to be like, okay, I could still provide for my family. I could still, like, have something that gave me value. And yeah.
Well, I'm happy to hear you say that, because I would have felt pretty bad if we'd have worked together for that 8 years. I'm like, John, I told you like 8 times.
Yeah. No, I didn't. I never really told anybody.
Yeah.
My wife knew, and that was about it. Like, it was never a broadcast kind of goal of mine.
When you look back on that 12 years then, like, would you have done it the exact same way? Like, kind of like keeping that goal very private and not, or would you wish you kind of would have shared that along the way with some of the guys you were close with?
Not necessarily sharing it, but I do wish I did things differently even in my 20s that would have got me into the trade sooner and then into fire sooner. As far as how life's worked out, you know, you can't change anything. So I'm happy with where I'm at, and success has found me in its way. But yeah, I do wish for sure that I decided earlier. I wish maybe there was a high school program for trades in my hometown that would have given me better direction instead of just like university was the cut and dry kind of route, right? But the trades just aren't advertised. You spend $0 on getting into the trades, you know, you're paid to be a tradesman from day one. And that value is I think is just so lost in it all. You don't have to make an investment financially to, like, find your career, right? You can be paid $80,000 a year within like 4 years of being, you know, you can be 24 years old, like straight out of high school, and you'd be making $80K and more. Like,
Yeah.
you know,
Where was home for you? Like, where did you grow up, or where was high school then?
Victoria.
Yeah. And like, it's your memory that like, so like, as far as you remember, like, trade's just not even a consideration. That
No.
was just university or bust.
Yeah, but not until my 30s, man. Like, no, or late 20s when I finally was like, okay, like, let's get something like a tangible skill, not just an outdoor advertiser, you know? So it was, or a business owner. I know you've been very successful, but it's also built on plumbing.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you had your foundation before you became a business owner, right? So yeah, for me, it was get that, the realization that, like, okay, I need something that's like a tangible skill. And so that's when it all kind of started, that career path to, like, okay, let's become a tradesman, and then let's look into firefighting and make it all happen.
Interesting. Like, was there an external, like, somebody else who who you knew who was a firefighter? Like what? It's just I find it fascinating. Like, that's a 12-year goal as you describe it, right? With a lot of work to put in ahead of that, right? And like my only regret is I didn't celebrate that with you more, right? Is that like when I found out that you were becoming a firefighter, to me, I kind of thought this was like a whim, right? Like one day you got up, you're like, you know what, this isn't like I don't want to do plumbing for the long term or something like that. Maybe firefighting's for me. As I talk now, I'm like, dude, I would have had maybe a bigger party for you. That was
It was the ultimate long play, man.
the ultimate long play. It's 12 years of hard work, like intentional, like working off high rescue, right? Like starting at the bottom of a ladder, starting a new trade, right? Going from being your own boss to taking orders, right? Sucking at everything,
Yeah.
right? Like as you learn, like how to do water lines, how to do rough ends,
Yep.
like flooding a house.
Yep.
Actually, let's
It
pop.
wasn't a severe flood, but it was a flood.
Do you remember it?
Yeah, in Altadore.
Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely.
What was that like?
I think you always had a good way of presenting a fuck up to people. It's a part of my language, but it was always John calls and it's, hey, did you do the plumbing in Altadore? It was never a direct like, hey, you've caused the flood. It's like, did you do the work there? And you're like, yes, I did the work there. And it's like, oh, good, because it's flooded. And you're just like, sweet. I was like, do you want me to come and fix it? And you're like, no, I got guys here. It's all good. And I was like, okay. And like, I was like, you could take it off my pay if you want, right? Like that was my, I always find myself to be, or try to hold that accountability and own your mistakes and learn from them.
Did you learn?
Absolutely. I don't think I ever flooded a house after that. And that was my late first year, early second year apprenticeship. That was probably 2017 that happened. So
Do you remember what you changed? Did you change anything to go did you change anything in your system or your process to go from doing work that caused the house to flood, and then all of a sudden you didn't do it again? What was the shift?
I mean, you said the word right there, system.
Yeah.
And like create that system, and it was it's cut the pipe, put the ring on, fitting in, crimp the pipe, and you do that every time. You don't dry fit crimps. You don't like do 5 and then go back and crimp them. You just do the single motion every time, and you create that system and that like robotic movement so that you never have those mistakes again. I know other guys, if you do like an X on the crimp or whatever it is that makes your mind like compute that it's complete is.
What did it feel like to take that phone call from me?
No, it's terrible. Failure sucks at the end of the day, right? Like you don't want to be messing up or letting people down. I think that was a big one for me, is like letting you down and letting the company down, knowing that house was a multi-million-dollar property, and I was thankful that it happened above the garage, not above the kitchen. So it's like, okay, well, this is just a drywall like repair, nothing that's like, we're not dealing with floors and cabinets. But I remember you saying like after that happened and the conversation was, minimum on a leak is, what is it, $3,500, $5,000? Like, yeah, that's probably, price has probably gone up since then. That was 8 years ago. So yeah, just always holding that number in my head too. I love numbers, and like knowing that like if I make this mistake, it's going to cost John $5,000, right? So it's like that's way above my pay grade, and it was just knowing that and always keeping that in the back of my head and passing that on to any apprentice that ever worked with me is like, hey, if you mess up, guess how much it's going to cost, right? And like, I hope you take that seriously.
When you were doing your apprenticeship, or like when you were learning from the guys, right? Like learning from Scott, or like learning from your journeyman, how many of them ran through a process with you about like how to crimp a joint to make sure you don't flood a house, right? Or a process?
Yeah, I mean, Scott's the best journeyman I've ever had, for sure. And his attention to detail was always like noticeable. You knew that he cared more than anybody, right? Like, so he was the perfect example of someone that you can work with and learn from and like gain that skill, right?
Did he have a system?
Oh yeah.
Did he tell you the system?
Probably. And I probably ignored it.
Did you follow the system?
Yeah. No, of course not.
And that's kind of what I want to change.
And I can make
right?
excuses of like maybe why I didn't do it,
Yeah.
but it's also, it's just.
Well, but it cuts to the chase, right? So then I would say is, do you think you're an exception then? Right? Do you think you're the only apprentice who's ever been told the system and not followed the system?
Absolutely not. Like,
So why is that? Why is? How do you go from being told by Scott, has a system, like doesn't flood houses?
Yeah.
Right. He's told you the system. He's like, hey, by the way, if you do this, you're not going to flood a house.
yeah.
You don't follow the system. You flood the house, and you go, you know what? I'm going to follow the system from now on.
Maybe
And then
that system
you don't
wants
flood,
something.
and then you don't flood the house. Don't flood any more houses.
Yeah.
Like, and you know, we might even have to come back to it as you think about it. But like, is there a way? Like, how else can you get someone to resonate? Because, to resonate with the fact that sucks for someone of high character and pride, which you absolutely are. And I remember that. I remember being in the house. I remember the flood. I remember the phone call. I remember taking apart the ceiling. I remember all of that. And I remember the care that you had. That was not a flippant phone call. You were not happy about it. You were not indifferent about it. You took that very personally. And that's one of the things that I think about all the time as a leader and as we work with people who just don't know, is how do we save them from that? Like feeling like they're not competent, feeling like they've made a mistake, feeling like that they need to come up with $3,500 of their own money.
Yeah.
Right? Because you wouldn't be the first person I've ever spoken with who's like, John, I'll pay for it.
Yeah.
I'm like, no. Like why don't we start with just don't flood the house?
yeah.
Right? But like, is there a way that resonates better from a training perspective?
Yeah, that's a good question. Sometimes it is just a learn from your mistakes, I think, in a hard way. And like, obviously, you're swallowing those mistakes, which can be quite costly. But I don't know, man. Yeah, it'd be a tough one to teach people without learning the hard way. And learning the hard way is sometimes the path I've always liked to take for whatever reason. So
I've had that conversation with a few people in the last little while, but just how much of the trades is built on learning the hard way. I think for the audience or for anybody else, the trades are the only industry that's what I grew up in from 4 years old and onward. And so it is that like school, like I've had floods. I've made mistakes, right? I've mopped up water, like with whatever clothes I'm wearing at the time, right? Try to mitigate damage.
yeah, I've used a couple Wiehler shirts before.
Yeah, right. And you just think about, there is a certain breed of people who don't care, right? But I find that the absolute rarity, the majority of people are high care individuals who make an honest mistake. And I'm trying to, one of my projects for 2025 is like, well, how do we better our training process and better our learning process to just help people not make mistakes, not just for the benefit of the company, but for their own mental health and well-being. Like,
That's awesome.
Most of my experience is like, it'd be like, hey, did you sleep super well that night? If you know you flooded a house, I've called you, said there's damage. I'm generally not super friendly in those calls, but like friendly enough.
Yeah.
But my gut feeling is you probably didn't sleep that super great that night, right? And because you care.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
As a whole, like when you're going through your apprenticeship, was there something that stuck out, like something that you really enjoyed about your apprenticeship? Like the way you were treated or the way you were taught or like anything in that regard? And then alternatively, was there anything that really stuck with you that just, even to this day, you remember like not being super great and that wish would have been handled better?
I think as far as like the way I was taught and everything, maybe I chalk it up to just who I am and the character I bring, and then my age as well, that people have never felt like they need to like rain on my parade necessarily. Like I've always been treated with respect. I find in the trades, no one's thought they need to yell at me for whatever reason, and maybe I'm just lucky in that sense, right? Like I do see other guys getting yelled at and I'm not getting yelled at. So it's like, all right, well, I guess I'm doing something, right?
Do you know what it is? What do you do right? Or so if you watch someone getting yelled at, what makes you different that you weren't the guy getting yelled at?
Maybe my accountability and my care. Like I've always showed up and cared and worked hard, so it's some things you can't really teach, right? It's like just show up, work hard, be on time. Like there's pretty basic standards in the trades. You don't have to be an outstanding like academic or anything. You just have to show up, work hard, and like be consistent. you know? Like, don't call in on a Tuesday every Tuesday and say you're sick. Or like, I don't think I ever missed a day of work until I actually had kids. That whatever, for, you know, when kids get sick, you got to stay home. Like, those are things you can't necessarily avoid. But me personally, I never missed a day at Wiehler. Like, I never called in sick for any reason. And that's a work ethic that maybe I was lucky to inherit, but also I think it was just something that I held a standard for myself.
Well, and what I'd say, like, that's my memory as well. And when I think about people who are just starting out in the trades, or starting out in really any career, and like when you show up every day consistently, and maybe you did take a day off, like at some point, maybe you did get sick once in 4 years, right? But I guarantee you, from the perspective of your manager or your boss, they would have looked at that and gone, he must be sick. Right? Like, really, without a shadow of a doubt, because you build that track record of being so reliable.
Yeah.
Right? That you, all of a sudden, your word just is good enough. Right? Do you need a doctor? Do you want a doctor tonight? Of course not, man. Like, just get better.
Right?
Right? And when you think about like accountability, and you think of guys who maybe just don't know, who didn't have a similar upbringing, what's an action that you would associate with being accountable as it comes to being an apprentice? Or you talk about like care or like give a shit. What is something that you would have done that Scott would have noticed and you're like, yeah, like Kevin does this, therefore I trust him, or therefore he gives a shit, therefore he's accountable?
The first word that comes to mind is like initiative.
Yep.
Being able to just kind of take on tasks because you were showed them, or just if you don't know how to do something, pick up a broom and start sweeping instead, right?
Would you do
Until
that?
you're given it, absolutely. And I would sweep. Like, you think I ever made an apprentice carry my tools in or sweep for me?
No,
Absolutely not.
but they're the apprentice.
No jobs above me, man. Like, yeah. And now as a firefighter, what do you think I'm doing right now, John?
Man, I can't wait to get to that.
Apart from being on fire trucks and everything like that, I clean toilets.
Yep.
You know, like, that's because that's where you start. You're the apprentice again.
Yeah.
And the firefighting industry is like almost exactly like the trades. It's a trade. If you look at the whole picture, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's the captains are journeymen, and the hydrants, which is my position now, is the apprentice. Like, you're always learning and you're always kind of moving up that ladder, trying to make a name for yourself and become something more than what you were yesterday, right? Like, you're always trying to learn, and it's a constant education.
So, how much would you associate with the word then humility?
Like, having
Yeah.
humility.
Yeah. Is that
I've
a
never
value that
been-
you would need?
Oh, I've never
that you
been. I've never had my humility tested more than in the last 4 months, going through academy and now being on the floor and like not knowing anything and like being back at square one, being a 40-year-old apprentice and like starting from the bottom and kind of putting myself out there for failure. Like, it's been an extreme challenge, but it's been worth every second, right? Like, I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Is there something, or is there memories or experiences that you have, or that you had in trades or even before then, that you kind of look back and like, I've been through this before, like I know what this is like, or is this something new for you?
Oh yeah, no, the trades were like the perfect foundation for becoming what I am now. They really were, because it's the work ethic, it's the drive, the push to become better. For me, like, plumbing was always, I got to learn all these skills so that I can do this job independently and like proficiently. So for me, it was always learn drainage, learn venting, learn water lines, and then it's let's learn hydronics now, right? And I think, from my skill set, you could put me in a multi-million-dollar, 5,000 square foot home by myself, and I could do all of that.
Yeah.
And I did that a number of times on a number of projects, right? At Lakeview, Aspen, like I've done the sole plumbing on a number of houses, and Monogram with the house in Upper Mount Royal, like I did all of it.
Yeah.
Right. And that was such a huge, like, piece of pride for me, man. Like, that was everything. I was like, yeah, I did all this.
So,
Sometimes with a little help, which maybe that is something I didn't like, is that I maybe could have had an apprentice here and there, because I do like teaching.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I was like, I don't care. I was like, you want me to do it by myself? I'll do it by myself. I was like, you're gonna pay me to do it? Like, sweet, let's do it.
so you set the goal very personally that you're going to be a firefighter one day. You set the benchmarks for yourself that you're going to have to achieve in order to do it. That's going to increase your likelihood of success, because nothing is guaranteed, because they're going to whittle it down to 2%, and you need to be the best of that 2%. At any point in time while you were plumbing and you're getting such a vast exposure to the different sides of our industry, between plumbing, between rough-in and final, custom, hydronic heating, boilers, and service, because you did it all. You had a high level of experience, especially for someone your age, and you excelled at it, right? You were important at the company you were at.
Mm-hmm.
Was there anything that could have, did you ever consider not becoming a firefighter and just sticking with the trade?
Honestly, I can't say. Firefighting was my ultimate goal, and achieving that was kind of, that was my goal. Like, I had to become a firefighter. Also, I was, like I said, I didn't share that with people because I was also, I wouldn't want to say content, but I would have been very comfortable continuing as a plumber and maybe moving up in the upper management system, because, like I said, I do love to teach and I love being involved in all aspects of the trades. Like, it was fun, man. It was an awesome 8 years that I had with you guys, and
Yeah, and because that's what I want to kind of get at.
I look back on that fondly, right?
Well-
And always will.
And like full disclosure, it just pisses me off that Kevin doesn't work with us anymore, right? And then I think to myself, I'm like, man, was there anything else we could have done differently? Because what I'll say is, from a larger industry perspective, the plumbing industry is weaker because you're not in it, right? I'll tell you the same thing that I told whoever from the fire department called me, right? Didn't tell me about Kevin. I basically broke down in tears. I'm like, the guy's amazing, right? It doesn't matter what you give him, he will do it. He'll see it through to the end. He will learn, right? He cares about people. He communicates effectively. He knows when to talk. He knows when not to talk. I was like, you'd be insane not to hire him, right? And then I'm thinking to myself, man, it was, and then I took it personally, right? Because I think, well, man, was there something that we did or didn't do that led you to leave the trade, right? Because I believe that our industry needs more people like Kevin Young, and we have one less.
Appreciate it.
Right, so I'm just wondering, from that higher perspective, and especially, it's new information for me that was a long-term goal, right? But is there something about the trades in particular that you didn't see yourself being able to be in it for 40 years? Or that's my question. Could you have seen yourself being in the trades for 40 years?
Yeah, absolutely. That's me taking care of my body and taking care of my health mentally and physically. The amount of guys that I'd meet that wouldn't do groundworks because they were too old, and I was like, how old are you? And they're like, 32. I'm like, dude, if you're not getting on your knees at 32 to dig some trenches, then you need to change your mindset and your after hours program. Go work out, go stretch, do something different with your life, because writing yourself off at 32 or 40, your dad's a sweet example. You think Marty was not digging trenches when he was 65? That guy did it all, and it was amazing to see, right? He'd get in there and do the job, and he had no hierarchy to him when he showed up on a job site.
Isn't that?
I've done groundworks with Marty, just him and I, crushing trenches and throw a pipe around, and it was awesome.
Yeah, you'd been working with a 67-year-old man at that point.
Yeah.
Right?
And I was like, who's got to keep up? Me. I was like, he's doing it. And so that's the kind of standard I tried to set. It's dude, I'm 40. Pick up your pants and let's go to work here. And I tried to set that standard with the simple stuff too, right? Carry your tools into the house, sweep. I'm no better than any job on that job site, right? And I don't think anybody should be.
And
I think that was a maybe a journeyman kind of mentality that is archaic in its way. Is like,
I'm with you.
yeah, like
Right.
nobody's below you. They might be your apprentice and they might want to like need to learn a bunch, but they're still a human and they still have like value as far as doing their job and whatever that job is.
I'm with you. Like honoring people's intrinsic value.
Yep.
Right. Like that. It doesn't matter what someone's position is in any company or any interaction. There's nothing inherently different, right? Between me, between you, between like the guy who just started today in our shop, right? Like you're all worthy of value,
Yep.
right? And I think sometimes that does get lost as people get promoted into leadership roles who just shouldn't be, and who are not prepared for it, right? And then we put them out there generally as an industry, like alone to kind of struggle through it, and then we'll get into the mental health side. You mentioned taking care of yourself mentally and physically. Yep. What's your mental health care like, like when did it start? When did you become aware of that?
Taking time for yourself, like, and I might not even be the best at it because my wife still pushes me to like go hang out with friends and like take time off, go have a steam, whatever that may be, right? Like, but for me, it was always working out, getting the blood flowing and like having that release there. I think that was kind of a double win, is like you get stronger, physically healthier, and you get mentally healthier as well. And then like I mentioned before, or not on this podcast, but as you know, my wife is a psychologist, so she's always been able to push like a stronger mental health on me. And moving into being a dad has been an incredibly trying and like challenging time as well, but it's the best, once again, I wouldn't trade it for anything. And that's above anything I've ever worked, any paid job I've ever had. Being a dad is the hardest thing I've ever done.
Yeah.
By a long shot.
Why?
It's a 24-hour job.
Yeah.
But, like there is no break from being a dad as far as I'm concerned. Like I'm always trying to be there for my kids and control my emotions so that they don't have to absorb them or however they might take that on, right? Controlling any different temperaments, because kids are sponges, and like you have to like intentionally be there. You can't just wing it in a way, which is kind of how I tried to roll into it. Is that, friends would give me books and, hey, like, this is how to be a dad. I was like, man, I don't need a book. Like, I'll be a dad. Like, how hard could it be, right? And then it's like, turns out it's the hardest thing for a dad. So maybe I should have read a book, but also I think time is huge. Is like, give your time back. And like, that's why going on paternity leave was massive for me.
Dude, actually, let's talk about that. Like, you're one of the first people at Wiehler who took paternity leave, right?
Mm-hmm.
What was that like? What was that like in the background? Like the mental side, like calling me, asking for it. Just what was it like on your end? I know what it was like for me. I remember where I was
felt like garbage for a week, man.
Really?
Like my guts were in a knot for a week. Every time I even thought about calling you, I felt just scared, nervous. Like I was like, oh man. At the end of the day, I was like, I'm not gonna lose my job, but like, if I do, this is,
Did you think that was a potential consequence?
Not with you, I didn't actually think it would come true, but it was also, I think I even said on the phone, I was like, you can fire me if you want, but like this,
You did say that.
Yeah, and it's true. I was like, if you want to like release me now, that's fine. And that was after 6 years, or we're doing 5 at that point of being with Wiehler, and I just got my journeyman. I was, certified, and that was something else I did with you, was complete my entire apprenticeship through Wiehler, and might have been one of the first guys in your company to do that as well.
You were.
From bottom to completion. And yeah, but it was scary, man, for sure, to actually have to put myself out there and say this is my like primary value right now, is being there for my new family and my new kid. Like that was above and beyond anything else, right? Like I was like, I will lose my job over this happily.
And And I remember that call, and especially, that was what, like 6 years ago?
No, 3.5.
3.5?
Would have been.
Man, it feels like
Yeah.
forever.
Or like 3, because I went on paternity leave when my boy was 9 months, my first. And then I did 6 months with my second.
But I remember talking to you and recognizing, right? Like we're in Alberta. The employment law is like maternity, paternity leave. That is protected leave.
I know, I'm entitled, yeah.
right? And all these things are going in my head, right? And then just like, do you have to go, right? Like,
I think your question,
Oh.
you were on a scale of 1 to 10. How important is this to you?
Yeah.
And I was like, it's a 10, man.
Yeah.
And you immediately were like, yep, okay,
okay,
and that was it.
and that's right. And it's like I've learned so much, right, in my life. But that was really a defining moment, like because of how much I cared about you, right? How much I knew you personally, right? And when you did, like, I remember it the same way. As soon as you told me it's a 10 out of 10, well, then it became easy to support you in it. Now, like, did you have any regrets at all? Like after the phone call, after the paternity leave coming back, was there anything that you regretted about taking leave?
No, absolutely not. Taking more leave probably would have been better, and which I did with my second kid. I took 3 months with my first, and that was a phenomenal 3 months. Like, you being able to be there as a dad, and I know some people don't like that phase of kid, but I'm 3.5 years in and haven't found a phase that I don't like. You know, I don't mind changing diapers and all that fun stuff, and I think that's just my mentality as a person, whether it's work or being at home. Right? It's like no job's too like petty for me to do.
Is there anything, when you think about like being a dad, having the courage to call your boss and take paternity leave, being willing to put your job on the line and recognizing that you're an important person, you filled an important role, like we're going to miss you.
Yeah.
And having the courage saying, I care about you, I care about the company, I care about my career, and I'm going to go be a dad for the next 3 months.
Yeah.
Right? Now, is the key, so you deeply care about being a dad. Is there anything in the trade or even before the trade that you look back at now that helped prepare you to be a dad? Like where you're like, oh man, I've kind of been through something similar, or is being a dad and being a tradesperson like no similarities?
I'm sure there's some similarities. Like, as a plumber, you're dealing with the poop side of things. Yeah. So there is the getting the hands dirty situation,
Yep.
and that's all fine with me. I think hard work, man. Hard work and long hours. You know, like weird hours too sometimes. If we went on calls, we'd do our rotations on call with you, and I would get calls at 1 a.m, 2 a.m, and I've never been a 9 to 5 guy necessarily, so I don't mind working 16-hour days or whatever it is. But yeah, hard work for sure. Interesting. Yeah, and yeah, getting your hands dirty.
Is there something like when you kind of like, I guess you've been with the firefighters now for 7 months?
No, just it was academy for 3 months.
Okay.
And then December 13th is when we graduated academy. December 17th was my first shift, and so yeah,
Oh man, here we are. So
just a month, man.
and a bit.
Yeah, barely a month.
any and you're happy with the decision? This is kind of what you've worked the last bunch of years for.
Oh, yeah.
Is this what you thought it would be?
Oh yeah, if you did, one thing you might not necessarily hear as plumbers or in the trade, but you do hear from almost every firefighter, it's the best job in the world.
Really?
And that is a very common opinion from everybody you work with on the floor in the Calgary Fire Department, and I'm sure in any other fire department, it is the best job in the world.
So and then how many people that you're working with now have a similar experience and background in getting on with the fire department, with getting a trade first and then joining?
Yeah, I mean if you go on the website and look up the prerequisites for getting into fire, it's diploma, high school education, or trade. The trades are as valued as anything else as far as a foundation for becoming a firefighter. Anytime you tell anyone you're a plumber or electrician or tin basher, whatever it is, like, you are highly valued as a tradesman in the fire industry.
So like if you're talking to like, if let's say somebody in the audience is like, 16, 17 years old, 18, they're in school, right? And they're like, man, I want to be a firefighter. Right? But like, as far as your experience goes, like, man, like get a trade.
Yep.
18 years old, go get a trade.
Yeah, 100%.
Excel at it.
Yep.
Right? Be humble.
Yep.
Sweep the floor.
Yes.
Pack your tools in. Pack your journeyman tools in. Right? Pack your journeyman tools out. Clean up after yourself.
Yep.
Because you set those habits now, you'll succeed in firefighting.
100%.
And
Yeah.
if you don't, what's it like?
You probably wouldn't succeed in firefighting.
Yeah.
You know? Like,
Black and white.
yeah, I don't think so, but I also don't think you'd succeed in the trades if you didn't bring that attitude, right? Like, and it's once again, like, I think it's sometimes hard to teach a work ethic and like caring. Some people just don't. And yeah, I don't know how you can like sit somebody down and be like, hey, you got to like work harder. And it depends on how seriously some people want to take that, right?
Well, I'm gonna. I kind of like. I really fundamentally disagree with it.
Oh, yeah.
Honestly,
Yeah.
is like you can teach it, and I think so often in our industry now we just don't teach it. The number of people who we have been on the verge of terminating their employment because they show up late astounds me.
Oh, yeah.
And then what we've discovered is we have this secret trick. Do you know what we do with people we're about to fire because they show up late all the time?
It's threaten to fire them.
No. We sit them down in a meeting and we ask them first if they know what time they start.
The
First question.
The basics.
It's a basic one, right? And it goes back, right, to, hey, did you wrap this house in?
Yeah.
No, you didn't? Great. Have an awesome evening.
Your loaded question.
It's a loaded question, right?
Yeah.
Hey, do you know what time you start? Yeah, man, 7. Cool.
Oh, okay.
I noticed that you show up about 7:15, 7:20 every day.
Yeah.
Is there anything going on that we need to know about? No, like, I just struggled getting here. Is it traffic? Is it family? No. Well, okay, but so you could make it here theoretically by 7? Yeah. Yeah. And you go, great.
No.
But is actually really important here.
Is it?
Yeah. It's really important that you're here at 7. That's why we set your start time at 7. And when you're not here at 7, people notice. This is the impact, right? It's so important. And if there's no other circumstances that are preventing you from getting here at 7, if you do this again, we're going to let you go. And really, it's that important you're going to fire me? Yes. And you know what has happened? Without exception,
People show up.
they show up at 7. Right?
Amazing.
Or they tell us that there's an extenuating circumstances. That then you start learning, you go, man, like between me and my wife, I gotta drop off the kids sometimes, like the daycare's here, daycare's there. Like I try to make it by 7, but like, but 7:20, depending on traffic, like that's what happens.
Yeah.
Great. Would 7:30 be better? And you watch their face, they're like, really? Dude, like, I don't want to stay here either. But then you get into like, hey, bring your own tools in. Like, has someone told them that's important, right? When you talk to guys who are digging the trenches, an apprentice, like, one day I won't have to do this. No, man. Have you met Marty? 67 years old. Doesn't have to be here. He's digging trenches,
Yeah.
right? Sweep up after yourself. Sweep up. Like, have you ever had to sweep up after, like, for the guy who was there before you?
Well, I mean, luckily with plumbing, it's not as much of an issue because you're just following the framer in.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, if you got to clean up, you got to clean up.
Yeah. And I think there's like I will say just as an industry in general, there's a strong lacking of accountability, right? As a whole. And a lot of leaders just unwilling to set the rules to make sure they're fair and then notice,
Yeah.
right? And I think it's easy to take for granted, like the Kevin Youngs of the world who do come by it honestly, right? Like, hey man, I'm going to show you this once. Do you need to show you again? No, right? When you're working ahead of your journey, you're grabbing fittings before they get there. But then there's a big gap between the next guy where you're just like, hey, as an apprentice, I want you to hand me the fitting. Like, I will know you're learning when you've got the tool I need before I ask.
Nice.
I'll know you're learning when you've got the fitting I need before I ask, right? I will know that you're ready when you're packing out while I'm making the material list for tomorrow, right? And just having the courage to be able to teach some of those things. And one of my passions this year is really to take, like, when you talk about, like, exercising humility or being humble, and you go, I'm cleaning toilets. Yeah, man, I'm just starting at the bottom. And you don't say it with any indignation. This is part of the job.
Yeah.
Right? And being able to impart that wisdom and knowledge to guys who are coming out of school who may not have been taught that is the next, like, you're 40 years old and you're cleaning toilets, and that's part of the job. You don't outgrow it, right? I do the same thing at work. It's just what you do,
Yep.
right? And I think being able to impart humility. What are the actions that humility looks like, right? When you get asked to do something, do you second guess it or you just do it because you were asked?
Yeah.
Right? Get asked to do it, I'll just go do it, right?
You could spend more time complaining about it than the job actually takes, you know?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, how long does sweeping take? 10 minutes? 5 minutes?
Is there anything that you wish? So you've been there, like you went through like your basic training. You've been there for a month now. Is there anything that the trades could have done better to prepare you for firefighting, or do you feel like you had pretty good footing that was the right path to take?
I believe I chose the best trade to prepare myself for fire, but also there's such a broad skill set with fire that I feel like I was like, oh man, like this is great. Like I'm a plumber. I got all these skills, and then you show up there, and they're like, well, these are the tools we use. This is how we do it. And I was like, okay, well, I'm like all out of skill set, so I guess I'm back at square one, kind of thing. It was a little bit of a shock to me, to be honest, to be like, oh, okay, well, I actually don't know anything about fire compared to somebody who might have done their actual fire education, which you can go and do like it's schooling to become a firefighter. But the plumbing prepared me in the sense that it's like hard work and the accountability and like having pride and caring about what you do and the outcome that you're going to have.
That's awesome. Like, do the trades teach you pride, or did you have pride before you started?
And growing up, I loved playing with Lego.
Yeah.
You know, when I was a kid, like Lego was my go-to. It was building things, right? And plumbing to me was like an immediate connection to Lego. It was you're putting the pieces together, you see the result, and the results happen pretty quick, right? Like you can rough in a house in 2 days, and you have a completed job, and you can look back at it and be like, this is sweet. It's all straight. It's, you know, my wife always made fun of me because I'd show her pictures of boiler systems. I was like, look how straight these lines are. Like, this is great.
Yeah.
And she's always like, I don't know what any of this is. But I was like, yeah, but like, those are pretty straight lines. Like, how good does that look? And yeah, it was just always funny, right? And she'd always just look at my picture and be like, straight lines. And I was just, yeah. But I was like, dude, that is like so important to me and to our company and then to our clients to be able to walk into that mech room and see straight lines. I always thought, I was like, who wouldn't be stoked to walk in here and look at this? Like,
What do you think that does for a client who walks down to their mechanical room and straight lines, right? Everything level, plumb, square. Why is that important to a client, do you think?
I think, and I'd hope for the client that they'd know that what they can see in front of them is also what they can't see. You know, like that everything in that house is done right, not just what they can see in front of them. It's like you don't put a bunch of crooked pipes in the ceiling and then all of a sudden make a bunch of straight lines on the wall for plain view, right? So yeah, I always made sure, even knowing that, you know, within a week all these pipes are going to disappear because they'll be behind drywall and insulation. Like, it didn't matter to me. It was like, those have to be on point, and we're not swaying from that even a quarter inch. It's like, we're making this look good, so that it all works properly, and, you know, it doesn't rattle in the walls or anything like that, because all that holds like amazing value. You have to like kind of know 2 steps forward what's going to happen if you don't put strapping or anything like that, or blocking or backing. Like, you have to do it all to make sure that it's a quality job. And so I think for clients, like, if they can see that part you cared about, that hopefully they have the comfort to know that the rest of it has been cared for from the ground up.
Well, and I agree with that. And I think there's something to that for a client who doesn't know, they're outside of industry, right? We'll just go like accountants, doctors, lawyers. They're walking into their mechanical room, right? And What I think that would happen when you have like straight lines, when things are level, plumb, and square in a mechanical room, where everything's like right and tight, everything has a place and it looks like it belongs. The mind, most people's minds, they can't see what isn't there, right? So that it just looks normal. They can absolutely just take it for granted because that's what it should look like.
Yeah.
But if it wasn't done that way, there would be a sense like they'd walk in there and they might not be able to put their finger on what makes them uncomfortable, but they wouldn't be comfortable.
Yeah.
Right? And they wouldn't be able to say, well, the problem with this mechanical room is that duct is like 5/8 out of plumb, right? That water line like does this.
Right.
But they would walk in the mechanical room and go, yeah, I don't like it.
Yeah.
And I think that's the value that a really competent tradesperson does bring, is that they bring comfort to their home, because that for many people is going to be their only interaction with their mechanical system is the furnace room.
Yeah.
And if you take the time and attention, what I'm hearing you say too is that you only had one standard. You had one standard for behind the drywall and and that was the same standard for in the mech room, and it was consistent.
Yep.
And in your mind, that brought value to the client.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Does it take more time to do it?
Oh yeah.
How is it like an
But-
extra second?
Were you the most supportive person in taking more time to do it? Yes.
Why is that?
I was given that comfort knowing that, hey, if I take an extra 5 minutes or 2 minutes to make sure that this is done right, like I think that was the Wiehler way, right? Like it was to take the extra time. You never put the pressure on us as a boss to like speed up, I put that pressure on myself.
Oh.
But I knew from the top down that it wasn't, going to be an issue, right?
Now, because time's important to me. Was that an extra 2 to 5 minutes per mechanical room, or is that 2 to 5 minutes per water line? Like, is it 2 to 5 minutes per vent pipe? Like,
You'd be adding hours on a mechanical room, right? Like large mechanical rooms with a full hydronic system and everything, like you're adding hours on. You're not adding minutes. Yeah. You're adding a significant amount of time to make that primo, like.
yeah.
And like the amount of mechanical rooms I go into, or if you're doing, a service call or whatever, and you go in and you're like, who did the plumbing here? Like, what is this? And different color pipes, and they're all attached and coupling together. And you're like, what? Like, who would leave it like this? Right? What does it? And which is like, it's easy to judge other people's work, but it's also like, some people make it easy to judge their work because you walk in there and you're like, dang, you really dropped the ball here, right? Yeah. And these people are living in a $2 million house, and this is what you like were happy to leave them with.
Well, I think it speaks to what you talk about, right? Like, if it looks this way in the mechanical room, you can see it, right? If when you're driving past a house and things are out of level, plumb, or square, like that's stuff you can see. What don't you see?
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Where are your checks and balances? Now, like, as we kind of come towards the end, do you have any questions for me?
Yeah, I kind of thought of one that for Calgary Fire, where we run on 4 principles of pride, professionalism, teamwork, and respect. And I'd love to hear what your kind of idea for Wiehler is of those core values. What do you believe that you maybe base your company, core values on?
It's a great question. And we actually just very recently started working on this. So a month and a half ago, I had a conversation with one of the women who works for our company, and she's fantastic. And she goes, John, what my favorite part about Wiehler is? I go, what is it? She goes, we're not one of those companies who just puts our values on the wall and doesn't live by them.
Nice.
She goes, and her words were, we don't have values. She goes, we have values, but we don't have values, right? And for many years, I felt the same way. I actually liked it because internally we talked about there's Wiehler people, there's non-Wiehler people. Right?
The Wiehler
maybe
way,
there are.
right?
There's a Wiehler way of doing things. It's unspoken. There's not a manual somewhere.
I knew what it was, but yeah.
You exemplified it. Other guys didn't, right? You're working your way up. Other guys aren't. And then you started thinking about the same time, going, you know what? Is that inherently fair? Right? To not have them published, to not talk about what they are,
Yeah.
to not know them. Is that fair? And I thought about it. And went, it isn't actually fair, right? It's not reasonable to try to expect someone to join a company and then figure it out for themselves,
goes back to that, like, hey, what time do you think you start at?
That's actually a good point.
Right.
It does go back to that.
Yeah.
Do you know what the values are? No. Oh, right. Yeah. And then they'll go, well,
What
what are
are
they?
they? Yeah.
They do. Good point.
Nice.
Right. And then, then we went through a whole exercise, Kevin, because it's a great question. I go, well, the first thing I thought was, I'm going to think about them. I'm going to come up with them. And then I started talking with other people, and they're like, don't do that. You should have your manager. You should all sit together, right, and talk about them, right? And then, figure it out like that. And I thought, well, if it's like the managers just hanging out together talking about, these are all people who I know and like, we're all on the same page.
Yeah.
I can think of nothing better than be more fun, grab
Yeah.
some pizza, grab
beer,
shoot
shoot the breeze.
Shoot the breeze. We're gonna come up with some values. And I had this vision of like Moses coming down from the mountain, right? And be like, I bestow upon you the values of Wiehler.
Yeah.
Right? And I worked with Chelsea, who's a phenomenal human resource person now.
Yeah.
I thought like, hey, the company has values. We've not written down.
Yeah.
What are they? And how do we come up with them in a way that it doesn't feel like they're being dictated to?
Mm-hmm.
And so we came up with a plan to invite absolutely everybody in the company to come brainstorm what our values are.
Nice.
Out of the 140 some people we invited, we had 20 or 17 people like commit to coming, went out, and we had a phenomenal brainstorming exercise, right? And then with the question being, Wiehler has values. What are they based on your experience of working here, right? And then break out into groups and talk about what do they see inside of that. And we're about halfway through our values exercise because that was 2 hours, and we were able to narrow that list down to 7. And
What are some of the ones you're at that really hit home for you?
teamwork,
Nice.
empowerment, and the empowerment one is a big one for me.
Yeah.
Right? When I think about even just our conversation, and you talk about, well, I see something get done and just go do it, right? Like, like pick up a room and sweep, like make decisions, right? Be able to do stuff on your own, be able to carve your own path, right? Like even to call the boss and say, I'm taking paternity leave, right? Like to have that permission. Like teamwork is a big one, right? Where it talks about, and I hear it from our field staff quite a bit, where the plumbers and the HVAC guys will work together. And that's not all, like for people who don't know, that is absolutely not the industry norm.
Yeah.
Right? To have 2 people on site together who are not mutually incentivized for success, right? To work together as a group is just rare. And when our staff came up with that, I was like, that's really cool that they see it from that perspective. Like we talk about like care, like not just for staff, but for the client.
That was, yeah.
Right?
I was thinking like attentive. It's like,
And it is like, and like a big one for me is authenticity, right? Like what success is for you is different for me, which is different for anybody at the company. Creating a space that allows someone to like share their dream for themselves, right? And I'll say it, like when Scott started working at Wiehler, what's fast approaching 11 years ago, he's like, John, I hate this business. I'm done with plumbing. I'm going to become a police officer, but for the next 4 years, I'm going to be a great plumber for you. Is that okay?
nice.
What a trusting human being he was in that moment to basically say, like, dude, like, this is not a long-term fit for me. I'll be great, but I'm also leaving. Are you cool with that? For him to feel safe and comfortable in that environment, I want more of that, right? That, success doesn't necessarily have to mean that you and I work together forever.
Yeah.
That success means that you work at an environment where you can take paternity leave, take off 3 months, then 6 months. You're a better dad. You love being a dad. That's your primary goal. There's a job for you. You can still be successful, and Wiehler's successful, right? And for somebody else, that means working 12 hours a day because they're trying to save as much money as they can, right, to buy a house. And for somebody else, that might mean that they take, for Luke, because he takes 3 months off to go fly fishing, right? For somebody else, it means every second Friday off.
Yep.
I think there's a strong element of like individuality that was also on our values list, that there isn't a one-size-fits-all model. And I think when we embrace that, when a group of people embrace that we're all individuals and we're here for each other in different ways, that's very powerful.
Yeah.
And then like family didn't make the list, which bugs me. But I think we have a very different definition of family, right? But it's like family just means we work harder for each other, right? Like, we're not family, we're not related to each other. But when you told me that your priority is 10 out of 10 for your personal life, then I get on side of that right away.
Yeah.
Hey, personally, 10 out of 10, I'm with you. Right? And if you go, dude, it's a 4 out of 10. Okay. Like, well, let's balance this out.
Make sure you're thinking.
Yeah, like, can we rethink this? I got
Rethink your commitments here, yeah.
Right? But, and I think just that culture of, like, your problems are my problems, right? You've made my problems your problems, right? Hey, Kevin, I got a problem. Can you help me? Yeah, John.
Good.
Right? And you go, John, I got a problem. Can you help? And I think there'll be a word for that inside of, like, our values, but that's a big one. That it's unwritten, and I see it happen consistently, over and over again, where the men and women who work at Wiehler, they support each other, right? And generally speaking, without like something in return. It's just, hey, if you need help, I'll help you.
Yep.
And then with that knowledge that there will be another time when you will need support, and you get it. You'll give support, you'll receive it. And no one's got a scorecard. There's not an Excel sheet, like an Excel sheet on sick days or not, but on balance, people show up, right? When someone does call in sick, it's because they're sick.
Yeah.
Right? When someone says, I need help, it's because they need help, right? And I think that's something that I just think the world needs more of anyway. Whether it's a Wheeler thing or anywhere else, it's just like people supporting each other. That we like. How do we make your problems my problems your problems, and carry that load together? And that was one aspect of why I think it was very challenging, like to lose you, right? Is because you exemplify so many of what great qualities are in just a human being, right? And so what was Wheeler's loss? It's absolutely the firefighter's gain, right? But it just goes back to the quality of the human being that you are, right? And like to be able to have training opportunities in your new career, like to impart that wisdom and knowledge. Like my hope for you is that you're able to recognize all the things that make you special, right? And valuable to the people around you, right? And like I said, it's been a real privilege to just sit and chat with you again and
Absolutely,
hear more and learn. Here we are 8 years later or 10 years later, man. Oh, man, I'm still learning crap about you. So,
Yeah, no, this has been great, John. I really appreciate you inviting me down here and giving me the opportunity to talk a little bit and hearing from you. Great questions and everything. It's been fun.
awesome. Well, thanks very much, Kevin, for joining. And I hope everybody really enjoyed the interview. Thanks very much for joining us today.